Hey guys, it's June 6th, 2024, and I hope everybody's having a wonderful day today. It is a super hot and muggy day here in South Carolina. It rained last night, and the sun has come out, and I mean, it feels like an oven out here. I'm not joking. I feel like I'm at a steam table right now or something. But anyway, today I want to talk about varices, and one of the subscribers, Craig, asked me if I could make another video discussing this topic. And, especially with all the new subscribers that are here to the channel now, why not go ahead and do another video about this, especially since we had one of our subscribers who just recently had surgery and had banding done on the varices. And her surgery was successful. She's doing okay now. But the reason for talking about this today, because varices, they're not necessarily always caused by cirrhosis, but I think the numbers like 90% of varices are caused by cirrhosis. And the other day I was watching a video, and it was Dr. Berg who was actually talking about varices, and he had a really, he might have been talking about portal hypertension, I don't really remember, but he had a really good analogy to describe how this works. And I've talked about this like a wet sponge, and he actually brought that up as well. But the reason that varices develop, and especially in patients with cirrhosis, is think about your liver like a water filter. Your liver filters basically everything in your body. It filters your blood, it helps. Your liver has 500 functions. It's one of the most important organs that we have in our body. And what ends up happening is your liver is just like a water filter. And as we get cirrhosis, it's like a water filter that's over time has gotten dirty. So think about like if you had a water filter in your refrigerator. And every time you hit the water button, to fill up a glass of water on the fridge, the water passes through that filter and then comes into your cup. Well, over time, there's sediment, there's things that end up in the water supply. They go into that water filter, and those little pores in the water filter begin to get clogged up. Well, that's basically what's happening with your liver, but you're getting scar tissue on your liver. So the blood cannot properly flow through your liver like a healthy liver would. As we develop more and more scar tissue, what ends up happening is, just like that dirty water filter, the water can't pass through. There's still pressure on the back end. So what's happening with that dirty water filter? Well, that hose that's coming into that water filter, it's going to have a lot of back pressure on it, because the pressure is still the same. It's still trying to force into that water filter. But it can't pass through like it normally would. And if you've ever had like a water filter on your fridge, and you've noticed like the water won't come out as quick as it did when you had the new filter in there. So, that's often, lets us know, okay, we need to replace the water filter on our, wherever your water filter is. But like I said, the same thing's happening with your liver. And the water or the blood is not able to pass through your liver properly, so what ends up happening is it's creating back pressure on the veins that are behind it, which is called portal hypertension. And you end up with high blood pressure in your portal vein and the veins that feed into the portal vein and our esophageal veins. So what ends up happening is there's all this back pressure, and it starts to make the veins enlarge. And as those veins enlarge, it's putting more and more pressure on them, and eventually those veins will start to get bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point where it can be really, really, really scary and life-threatening. And that's when we have variceal bleeding. And when the varices burst, that can it can ultimately lead to us losing our lives. So we have to be very careful about that, And one of the things is that there's really not a lot of warning signs to let you know that you have varices. you don't, it's one of those things, it's kind of like, when you end up getting jaundice or something like that, it just kind of, there's really not a lot of warning, and then one day you just wake up and you look and your eyes are yellow. And the same thing with varices. Now, unless you go to a doctor, you let them know about your previous drinking history, that you might be concerned about varices, you might be concerned that you have cirrhosis, whatever it may be. If you are proactive and go speak to your doctor, they might do some tests, do some CAT scans. They can give you contrast, and the contrast basically is just it makes it so they can. It's like I guess like a radiated liquid that they put into your vein, and then they can see your vein structure through like your CAT scan or your MRI, and they'll be able to see if those veins are enlarged or what have you. But back to the varices bleeding. When they burst, like I said, there's just not a lot of warning signs. It's just one day, everything's good, and next thing you know, you're bleeding internally. And when that happens, your stomach will start to fill up with blood. And majority of the time, what's going to end up happening when your stomach starts to get filled up with blood like that, you're going to end up expelling it. You're going to throw up, or it's going to come out the other end. So you're going to have, either throw up with blood in it, or you're going to have like black or tarry stools that are going to be coming out, or you could have both, which I've had both of those at the same time. So you can either throw up red blood, or you can throw up what looks like black coffee grinds, and that's like an older blood that's been sitting in there for quite some time, and I've had both of them as well. And let me tell you, when that happens, it is very, very, very scary. When you throw up and then it's just blood. You're not gonna just throw up and there's gonna be a little bit of blood in it. I mean, it looks like a horror movie when it happens. And it's very, very, very scary. And the thing is with varices is when they burst, you've got to go to a hospital so that they can stop the bleeding. You're probably going to need to have a blood transfusion. If that happens, they're going to want to check your hemoglobin to see what your hemoglobin levels are. And depending on what your hemoglobin is and all that kind of stuff, they're probably going to, give you a blood transfusion if you allow them to do so. I've had so many blood transfusions since I've gotten sick. I don't even know how many, but a lot. I've had a lot of blood transfusions. The first time I was in the hospital, I think I had something like 7 transfusions or something like that. It might have been more. The other time I was in the hospital, the second time I was in the hospital, I don't even know. They had blood. They were giving me blood like the whole time I was in the hospital because I kept bleeding so bad. But the thing is with it as well is like this one time, the second time I got sick, and I've told the story a bunch of times, but I was on a job, I ended up getting sick. I'd already gone to the hospital the first time with pancreatitis, so I'd gotten out, I thought everything was honky-dory and A-okay. And I went back to work, was working about 4 months, and then ended up getting really sick again. I started throwing up, thought that I just might have had a stomach bug or something like that, and I just kind of just hung out at the house for a couple days until I ended up going to the doctor, and I think it was about 3 days later after I initially had gotten sick. And when I went to the doctor, he checked my blood sugar and said, you need to go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and on the way to the hospital, and I had been throwing up during this period of time, but I had not thrown up any blood. But on the way to the hospital, I told my wife, I need you to pull over on the side of the road. And when she pulled over, I threw up, and it was red blood. And I went to the emergency room. They did a CAT scan. They took some blood. They knew immediately, you're in the middle of pancreatitis. They said, we're going to go ahead and admit you to the hospital. And I said, okay, no big deal. Well, I don't remember exactly what time it was, but it was earlier in the day. I didn't get admitted into my room until late that night. And I think it was like 11 o'clock or something that night when I finally made it to my room. And when I did, I had just gotten into the room. And I told the nurse, they were trying to get me settled and everything, and I told the nurse, I said, I feel like I'm going to throw up. Can you give me one of those plastic bags? It's one of those bags with a little ring on the top. And she said, yeah. She gave me one, and I threw up in it. And when I did, I completely filled that bag up. It was 500 cc's of just red blood. When that happened, and this is one of the scary things that can happen with this. When I threw up all that blood, I guess I lost so much blood so quickly that my blood pressure just plummeted. It just bottomed out. And next thing you know, she started calling, and a whole bunch of nurses came running in there, and they took me from there to the ICU immediately right after that. But while that was happening, my blood sugar plummeted, and my blood pressure plummeted. My heart rate skyrocketed. I think my heart rate was like 200 something. It was through the roof. I thought I was having a heart attack. I was so afraid while this was going on, because I wasn't aware of what was happening. All I know is I didn't feel right. My heart was racing. I had just finished throwing up a bunch of blood, and I was passing out. I mean, I started seeing black, and it was just a really scary occurrence. But that can happen when you've lost that much blood, and I can't remember the reason why that happens, but I guess your body's like kind of going into shock, and your heart's trying to, when your blood pressure plummets like that, your heart's trying to get your blood pressure back up, I guess, and it's raising your heart rate, and I'm telling you, it was really scary. But my hemoglobin dropped like really low, and they took me to ICU. They actually had to put a PICC line in my chest to give me medication to actually bring my blood pressure back up, because it had gotten so low. And that's when they told me, we can't take care of you here. We got to move you to another hospital that can manage you. So they sent me to another hospital. When I went there, one of the first things they did was they did an endoscopy to go in there and take a look at those varices. And when I woke up, the doctor said, your stomach looks like hamburger meat. He said it's bad. And they were discussing doing the bands, which they never did, because they were worried that I was going to end up having a clot in my lungs or something like that. I don't really remember the exact reason why they didn't do it, but one of the things that they can do, and one of the reasons that if you do experience, you've thrown up blood, you've thrown up black coffee grinds, you have had black tarry stools, you have diarrhea and it's black, that's blood. If you have something like that going on, you need to go to the hospital immediately. And the reason being is that they can go in there and they can stop that bleeding. They can do what's called banding. And what they'll do is they'll go down your throat. It's basically an endoscopy, or I'm pretty sure it's an endoscopy what they do. But they go down your throat with a camera, they take a look at where you're bleeding at, and then they attach on the device that they go down inside of your esophagus, and they suck the vein into a machine, and then they put elastic bands onto that vein. And once they place those bands onto the vein, it stops the bleeding, and then what ends up happening is that will create an ulcer. The band will fall off, and then the ulcer will heal, and they stop the bleeding. And actually, when I was, right before doing this video, I took a look at some facts about this, and the survival rate of banding the varices is like 95%. So it's really high. And it said like 3 to 5 days that you should be, healed from them banding it. They say that you should, I've never had my varices banded ever, but it said that you most likely will experience chest pain from having the varices banded, and it will last about 3 days. They said it can be kind of painful. I've never experienced it, so I can't speak about it personally. I'm not, I don't know. But it's worth saving your life. It might be a little painful, but if they can go in there and stop that bleeding, because a lot of people lose their lives from varices bursting. I'll just tell you guys this story. For instance, my brother was telling me this story a while back, as a matter of fact, and there was a gentleman, he was actually a doctor, and from what I understand, this doctor was basically like a closet drinker, and I guess he did a really good job of hiding the fact that he drank. Anyway, he went and I guess picked his children up one day from school, brought them back home, and told the kids, hey, I'm gonna, do this. I'm gonna go to my room or whatever, my office, and I want you guys to hang out in here while I go to my office, and I'll be back in just a little bit. Well, the mom came home that afternoon and asked the children, where's your father? And they said, well, he's in his office right now. Well, the mom was like, that's not like him to leave the children alone like this. So she went upstairs, I guess, to where their office was, and found him. And I guess there was a bathroom attached to the office that he had. And she found him in there, and there was a bottle of vodka, and she found him leaned over the toilet, and there was, blood everywhere. I guess he had been in there drinking, and and just drinking necessarily isn't going to cause it. This comes from a long period of time of drinking, but it comes from drinking excessively over a long period of time, developing cirrhosis, and then creating that portal hypertension, which creates the varices to bleeding. So the guy had been drinking for a very long time. It wasn't just because he drank this one night. But when she found him, he was like hanging in the toilet, and there was just blood everywhere, and he had passed away because he had bled to death, and there was no one there. I guess his kids were there, but he might have been screaming for help or whatever, but nobody heard him. So you can lose your life from varices bursting. So it's very important if you experience something like that. I have spoken to so many people over the years that have had they have thrown up blood, and they didn't do anything about it. Actually, one of my old sous chefs from back in the day was telling me a story one time that and this is before I'd ever thrown up blood, and he was telling me, he's like, oh yeah, this one morning I woke up, I threw up blood, and I was like, did you do anything about it? And he said, no, I didn't do anything about it. And he never did. He never went to a doctor. Now, I guess his varices, healed themselves back up, it stopped bleeding, and he, was okay. But it's not one of those things that you just want to let go. If you have had a varices burst, that means that you've got some serious problems going on, and you need to have that addressed. So if you do have varices burst and you throw up blood one time and you don't throw up again, that does not necessarily mean that everything's okay. You still need to go to a doctor because there's an underlying issue that needs to be addressed. Now, not necessarily all varices are created equal. They're not all caused because of alcohol consumption, and they're not all caused because of cirrhosis. You can end up with blood clotting. You can have a blood clot somewhere in your portal vein system that can cause that back pressure as well. That can create the varices. There's other things you could have, like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That can lead to cirrhosis, which can lead to having the varices. So it's not necessarily all correlated with alcohol consumption. Hepatitis, which can lead to cirrhosis, which could lead to the varices. So drinking is not directly correlated with varices, but 90% of varices are correlated with drinking. But my point is that just not all varices come from alcohol consumption. So if someone's out there and has varices, it doesn't necessarily mean they were an alcoholic. There could be other factors involved, but it doesn't make them any less dangerous. Either you had it from drinking, or you got varices from eating too much sugar and you ended up with fatty liver disease, which progressed into cirrhosis. Either way it works. However you end up with the varices, they are just as dangerous. It does not matter. However it is, what's going on is you have veins that have so much back pressure on them that they have exploded, and they are bleeding, and it can take your life, and you really need to go to a doctor or a hospital immediately if you have varices burst, because like I said, it can be life-threatening, and that is not the way that you want to go. I can promise you that. Somebody's going to find you, and it's going to look like a horror movie if they come in there and find you like that, because trust me when I tell you, it's not pretty. When my wife came home and found me the first time that I ended up in the hospital, when she came home that day and found me, I was covered in my own vomit, and it was black coffee grinds, which was old blood. So I'd been bleeding for quite some time and wasn't aware, which now I understand, because I kept getting weaker and weaker and weaker as the time went on, and I couldn't breathe, which meant I've been bleeding for quite some time. My hemoglobin was very, very, very low. I was so weak, I couldn't even walk. And that's why when my wife came home and found me and I was covered in my own vomit, I was so weak I couldn't even get out of my bed anymore. My wife had placed a trash can beside the bed that morning, and I didn't even have enough energy to lean over and throw up into the trash can. I just laid there in the bed and was throwing up all over myself. The bed sheets were covered in it. I was covered. I mean, there was just vomit everywhere. And when she walked in and saw me like that, that's when she's like, "Okay, you're going to the hospital right now." It's very, very, very scary. And like I said, there's really not a lot of warning signs. There was nothing that told me leading up to that I had varices, until I started throwing up the black stuff. And I ended up getting sick, and was sick for a few days before I started throwing up the black stuff. Yeah, it was, I don't remember how long it was. It might have been like a day or two. I'm not really sure. But I just remember that I started throwing up and there wasn't black stuff in it right away. It might have been the same day. I can't remember. But the fact is that I did start throwing up the black coffee grinds. And it's not like leading up to that, like I had yellowing of the eyes or anything like that. There was just nothing that told me that this was about to happen. And it happened. And I waited entirely too long. And when I went to the hospital, the doctor told me, "We're going to do everything in our power to save your life, but, I don't know if it's going to work." And, that was really scary to hear that. So if in fact you do think that you might have varices, please go see a doctor. And if you've been drinking for a really long time, very heavily, I'm not telling you what to do, but that might be one of those things you might want to speak to your doctor about and see if they want to check you out. They can do an endoscopy and go in there and take a look. I know that when they did my endoscopy, they went in there. I woke up and the doctor knew immediately that I had very bad varices going on. But I think they can test you in other manners. Like I said, they can give you contrast. They can do an MRI, a CAT scan, and they can take a look at those. Because I know that just recently I had to have an MRI done. I spoke with the interventional radiologist, and he told me, because they injected contrast in me, and he told me, he said, "Your varices have shrunk a little bit, but not as much as we really wanted them to be." Another thing that they can do as well, for the varices, which is what I had done, and I talked about this at the beginning of the video, but I had a TIPS procedure done in January of last year. And then the doctor called me back and said that he wanted to try doing it one more time. And then in June of last year, June 21st, I think it was, as a matter of fact, I went and they did another TIPS procedure, which actually ended up working out. And the TIPS is, I'm not even going to try to say what it is, but it's an acronym for a shunt and a stent. And they basically go in there and they redirect the blood to make the flow through easier, and it decreases that backflow on those veins. And when that happens, and the varices will eventually start to shrink because there's not so much back pressure on those veins, and they're basically just unclogging the pipe, basically, is what they're doing. So, or changing out the water filter, like I was talking about in the beginning. They're just going in there and opening it up and letting the blood flow through properly. And there's different methods of things that they can do. They either redirect the vein, or there's just a bunch of stuff that they can do. And I don't want to get into all that, but when they do that, they open it up, basically let the blood flow through, and that decreases the back pressure on those other veins, which allows them to shrink. And then the chance of those varices bursting again is decreased. but still, once you have varices, they're there. They don't. I don't think they necessarily ever totally go away. They can go in there, and they don't always have to ban them if you're bleeding. If the doctor decides that, okay, these varices look really dangerous, I want to go ahead and ban them now, they can go ahead and just ban those varices up if they think that they might be a problem later on down the road, and go ahead and prevent you from having a bleed. And from what I understand, the success rate, like I said, is 95%. The mortality rate on that is really high too. I mean, it's really low, or however it works. The chance of you dying after having the bands done is not that high. The success rate for having those bands done is pretty good. So if you decide to go speak with your doctor, or you know that you have varices, speak to your doctor about it. They can go in there and place bands and prevent a bleed from happening. And from what I understand, like I said, it's only a couple days of recovery, and those varices do shrink down pretty good, but they don't necessarily go away forever. Now, I think there are some cases of people who have actually gotten their varices to completely go away, but I don't know the numbers on that. That'd be something that you'd have to look up and take a look at. I just wanted to come on here today and just discuss varices, what they are, what to look for, and like I said, they're very dangerous, and if you think that you have them, please go to a doctor or a hospital. If you've thrown up blood, that is a big red flag. And I'm not, sorry for the pun there, but like seriously, it's very important that you go get those checked out if you have thrown up blood or you have like black Rotary stools. Now, if you have black Rotary stools or you've thrown up blood, does that necessarily mean it's varices? No, but it could be. And that's something that you definitely need to get checked out, because there are things that they can do for them. Like I said, there are the bands. They can do a TIPS procedure. They can also place you on blood pressure medication, which I take as well. I take a beta blocker every day, which reduces my portal hypertension. I don't have blood pressure problems in general. My blood pressure is actually really low, but I take blood pressure medication daily to reduce the portal hypertension. So there are methods and things that they can do in order to fix that and to help you along your way. And another thing I looked at as well is that people that end up with varices can go on living a long life as long as they catch them and they treat them, and you don't have a bleed, and and you're somewhere where you can't get treated. There are some other things that you have to look out for with varices. It's one of those things where you don't want to be out too far out in the middle of nowhere. If you've had a history of varices, you got to kind of be careful about what you do. You don't want to go out in the middle of the middle of the mountains, and be 5 days out in the middle of nowhere, because if you do and you have a bleed, you're kind of in big trouble. So you want to kind of be close somewhere that there's a hospital kind of close. I don't go anywhere where I don't know there's a hospital at least an hour away, because I've bled so many times. It just scares me. From what I understand too, flying can be a problem due to the change in the pressure in the cabin and all that kind of stuff. Getting on airplanes with varices can, from what I understand, lead to bleeding. And that's the last place you want to be, is up in the air 20,000 feet and have varices bleed. That could be a pretty bad situation as well. So there are things to look out for if you do have them, and be careful about. But once again, if you have had something like that happen, please go see a doctor, because there's obviously some kind of underlying issue that's going on. And I'm not trying to scare anybody. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have cirrhosis per se. There could be a blood clot. There could be a lot of other factors that cause them. but it's definitely something that they can treat. And you know, we want to live as long as we can, and putting off something like that is not one of those things that you can just put a little duct tape on and just keep moving. That's one of the things you really need to go get checked out. But anyway, guys, I'm at 30 minutes now, and I need to stop talking. I don't want to make this video any longer than that. So thank you so much for watching today's video. I really do appreciate it. And like I said, guys, I'm back to regular schedule. I got to a bunch of the comments yesterday. I'm going to hop on there. I did reply to all the comments from the day before, but I'm going to hop on here and finish replying to yesterday's comments. And I'll reply to all the comments from the video that I just posted up today and all that good stuff. And there'll be a video tomorrow just as normal. Everything's back to business. And thank you so much, everybody, for being so supportive of this channel. I really do appreciate it. Until tomorrow, I will see you all then.